So now I'm going to go ahead and jump right in, and I'm going to introduce our two speakers. So we have Daniel Schmidt, who is from the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, and Mike Ingalls, who is from the Intervale Center. And they're going to be talking today about Get Your Hands Dirty, opportunities for working with nonprofits. So a little background about Daniel. He's been with VYCC since May of 2015, first as a farm team member and then as a land and facilities coordinator, and now as the Watershed Partnership Manager. And prior to VYCC, Daniel worked with the Green Mountain Audubon Center as an educator and sugar maker, and at the Community College of Vermont as an environmental science instructor. And back in the 2000s, Daniel spent 2 years as an AmeriCorps volunteer, first at the Catskill Outdoor Education Corps and then at UC Berkeley's Public Service Center. So that's a little bit about Daniel. And then Mike has managed the Intervale Conservation Nursery since 2008, and he brings a passion for Vermont native plants and an expertise in horticulture and farming to his work. He graduated in 2006 from Vermont Technical College with a degree in ornamental horticulture and landscape development. So we'll be hearing from both Dan and Mike. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it right over to Daniel.
Great, thank you. My first test will be the microphone. I think the little clippy thing is broken, so maybe I'll just use this microphone instead. As much as people, I'm sure, want to hear this the entire talk as I fuddle with it.
Oh yeah, so much fun. So we'll just shut this guy off.
Yeah, it's just like I'm getting no attention.
Yeah, not good. All right, so this should pick up everything.
Hello? Okay, great. Okay. Hey, everyone. My name is Daniel. As Maddie said, I work for the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps. We're out in Richmond, and we provide public work projects throughout the state. And I'll get into exactly what we do in a little bit. But I wanted to give a little bit of an outline of what I'll talk about for the next 20 minutes or so. So while I'm talking, I know questions might come up. Mike and I are going to leave some time at the end for questions. But if you do have a question, if something comes to mind, feel free to jump in. I'm happy to answer questions as we go. So I want to talk a little bit about VYCC, kind of what we do, and to give you a sense of what we're all about, and the types of GSI projects that we've been involved with. And I also wanted to give you a sense of how we go from having an idea about a project that we want to do to actually having a finished product. And this is actually a pretty complicated process. I think that when I first started with this job, I thought it was going to be pretty straightforward. And I'm slowly learning that it's really, really convoluted. There's a lot of players. And there's a lot of opportunities for you all who are entering this field to get involved. And so I'm assuming because you're here, you probably have an interest in nonprofits, or maybe just like an interest in working with nonprofits at some point. So I really wanted to give you a sense of all the players and how we all work together, but also to give yourselves a sense of how you might fit into that role. So if you're working in the GSI field, there's lots of places where you could kind of fit yourself in, and I just wanted to give folks a way that you can do that, especially in terms of the nonprofit world. Just real quick, how many folks are familiar with VYCC? Raise your hand. Look at that. I just walk out right now. That's great. I'm psyched that you all know, I'm actually surprised that so many people know VYCC. That's great. And how many folks are interested in being involved in nonprofits at some point? Or maybe you're involved with a nonprofit right now. So a few folks, cool. And even if you're not in future jobs in terms of watershed work, even if you're not working for a nonprofit, say you're working for the state or a consulting firm, probably chances are at some point you're going to be working with a nonprofit. We're all over the place and we like to kind of insinuate ourselves wherever. All right. All right, so just a little background on VYCC. So some of these images might be familiar to you. I thought I'd just throw a couple in there for folks who don't know VYCC to get a sense of what we do. So basically we are a hand labor organization. So what we do is not big machines, but we employ youth crews to do work. And so youth crews do work with gloves and hard hats and eye protection. This is a kind of a typical picture of what you might see if you're out in the woods and you come across one of our crews, and we do a lot of structures like this, like bridges, public works infrastructure. Notice the matching uniforms, helmets. That's kind of why everyone recognizes, right? Because like it's very seldom that you see an entire group of people wearing the exact same clothing and all equal degrees of dirtiness, like you do with VYCC. Some of you might recognize the barns. This is the West Monitor barn. This is our campus. And so this is a historic barn. And we have a lot of projects going on campus as well. So as we move forward with the Clean Water Fund and the Clean Water Initiative, we're also hoping that our campus, which is 400 acres, will become a demonstration site for more GSI stuff. So we'll put in GSI infrastructure to be able to train our crews up on that, those projects and be able to implement them in the field easier. Right now, we rely on partners to do to help with trainings for this type of work. But it's a pretty spot. Here's just another example of the types of stuff that we do. If you've ever been hiking anywhere in Vermont at all, chances are you've come across a trail that VYCC has worked on. We've worked on a ton of trails. We also work on invasive removal, invasive plant removal, as you can see here. So it's a wide variety of stuff. So our mission is teaching young people personal responsibility through meaningful work that connects us to land, community, and one another. But basically what we do is we provide young adults with an opportunity to gain an appreciation of the natural world and immerse themselves in this outdoor experience, providing room for personal growth, opportunities for leadership development, education, and job training. And a lot of that job training comes in the form of kind of critical thinking or environmental literacy, but a lot of it is actually technical skills. So we employ a lot of crew leaders. So we have crew members, which are younger adults, typically 16 through 24. Crew leaders are going to be 24 and older. Our crew leaders, this is a really good opportunity for them to get technical experience. So if you're really interested in, say, doing GSI projects, and you get to take the lead on one of these projects, you'll work closely with designers or with partners who are setting up these projects. And it can be a really good opportunity for folks to get a foot in the door in terms of this type of work. So a lot of our crew leaders that are interested in doing GSI work or water quality work find that this is a pretty seamless, it provides a pretty seamless transition into work with like state agencies or other nonprofits that are doing this type of work as well. The other thing that we do is we complete sort of priority public work projects. And those happen throughout Vermont. So we work throughout the entire state. We also work in other states as well. So we work in North Carolina. We do some work in New Hampshire when we can get it. Work in New York. So we're kind of all over the place. And that's partly because there's lots of work out there. Not every state has a youth corps like Vermont does. There are some national youth corps, but they're not in every state. And also we want to give Vermonters a chance to kind of go out and explore. So that's part of the youth development piece, is that we give young adults the ability to kind of go to a new place and see what it's all about, see what kind of work they're doing there, and then take those skills and that experience back to Vermont. So I think I gave you a pretty good overview of what we do. Trails, a lot of the state park stuff, wildlife habitat improvement. We do a lot of disaster recovery. And specifically, we do watershed management projects. And so that could be anything from trying to reduce erosion on back roads to doing invasive species control, floodplain restoration, like Mike will talk about later. We've worked with Conservation Nursery on doing spring plantings for flood control, and green stormwater projects as well. And so that's a big part of what we do and a big part of our environmental mission. So I just want to talk a little bit about the types of crews that we have. We have two different types. We have community crews. So these are folks who live in the community that they work, and they show up 8 a.m. Monday morning, they go home at 5 p.m. But we also have these residential crews, and they live as a crew the entire time. And so these you'll find camped out in state parks or on other land, and they're working mostly, or sometimes they're working, not all the time, in the backcountry. So their jobs take them pretty deep into the Vermont woods. Our day-to-day work is kind of like this right here. We get really excited in the morning, and we do some high-fiving and some group cheering. And then we plan out our day, and often our day involves a walk to the site. And so crews are often spending at least part of their day hiking in And this is especially true in areas where you can't get any mechanized equipment into that area. That's why crews are kind of versatile, because you can get people into an area much easier than you can get a skidder or an excavator. Crews obviously work on hand labor projects, so they have a whole tool cache, rock bars, shovels, mattocks, all those things that they can use to complete their project. And there's also a large part of what we do is environmental literacy, so we spend part of each day doing readings, discussions, and other activities that focus on environmental literacy. And then by the time the day is done, everyone is fully tuckered out and they go to sleep really quickly, even before it's dark sometimes. So here's just an example of a couple specific GSI projects that we've worked on, and just to get a sense of what the kinds of stuff that we do. So I think it's important to kind of recognize that the stuff that we do is hand labor specific. So what are some, besides what I've mentioned, what are some advantages, do you think, anyone can say, of using hand labor as opposed to mechanized labor? Like, what are some situations in which you'd want to use hand labor?
Cost.
Yeah, cost can be one. So you have to, in your grant or whatever, you have to add in the cost of equipment. Yeah.
Probably less environmental impact.
Yeah, so if you're going through an area, say a wetland, and you can't run a skidder through a wetland because you're going to tear up a whole bunch of the vegetation, that's a really good option, is to use a hand crew. Any other ideas?
Fine detail work is needed.
Yeah, so there's some things in which, you know, if you had a bucket, you couldn't quite put this together like you could by hand. So there's something really nice about having like 10 strong, energetic people to do this. And so this is a culvert header that we created. It just gives you a sense of the kinds of stuff that we do and the quality of our work. I think that looks pretty good, actually. They did a great job. Does anyone know what these are called? You get a free cake if you know.
Sweat.
No, it's close though. It is fascine. And so this is part of our Floodplain Restoration project, where crews are putting these in to grow up for floodplain restoration. We also work with road crews and other mechanized equipment. So here we have the road. Can you tell which ones are the road crew? I love this picture. I just think it's like, is the best picture. I love road crews, don't get me wrong, which is great. There's like 2 dudes standing around, just watching. So we'll work with road crews. We work with mechanized equipment. And oftentimes what happens is you need the equipment to easily move the material or to put it in place, but then you need a hand crew to actually move it or build the structure itself. So here we're putting in geotextile fabric and putting gravel on top of that. Okay, and just a little bit about me. So my role at VYCC is I'm the Watershed Partnership Manager. And what that means is I set up projects for our crews. Basically, I'm out there in the field working with partners, making sure that the projects are appropriate for crews and also in line with kind of what we do. I'm sure at this point, if some of you are graduating or you're thinking about it, you're like, well, how do I get from A to B? And my path was not straightforward at all. I don't know anyone really who works in this world. I was originally involved with science education, and then I went on to I went to grad school and went into the tropical wetland research field. So I lived down in Panama and worked on tropical ecosystems, only to move back up here and then get back involved in education, working at CCV, and then working at the Green Mountain Audubon Center. And then this job kind of mixes those two things, where a lot of what I do is project design, and I have to know the science behind it, and it's watershed, so it's kind of related to tropical wetlands. It's a little bit colder. And then using the education component in our sort of the youth development side of VYCC. So that's what I do. I'm also happy to take questions, if folks have them later, about exactly how you go about doing this kind of thing, because I know for myself and for a lot of other people, the road is not clear. And that's one of the nice things, because you can dabble a lot in the world of nonprofits and kind of find your niche. All right, so that's a bit of background about me and VYCC. But what I want to talk about for the last part is how we actually go from an idea to implementing that idea, and especially in terms of nonprofits. So it's different for everyone, right? Can anyone give me an example? So in an ideal world, how do you go from identifying a problem to implementing a solution? This can be as simple as you want. So what's one good way who would identify a problem? So if you think about the world of folks that are out there in Vermont, who identifies what are problems? Yeah, community members, right. Who else? That's one. Is there like a police force out there looking for problems? The answer is yes. Yeah, field tech, so there might be like state field technicians. All right, so say we've got a community member and they're like, oh my God, every time it rains, I've got this gully that forms in my backyard and it's washing right into Lake Champlain. So in that instance, what do they do? What would you guys do? If that was you, who would you contact? Yeah.
Local conservation district?
Yeah, you could contact a conservation district. That's great. Do you see my talk? No, just kidding. So that's awesome. You can contact a conservation district. What else? I'm actually really happy no one's really answering because it's confusing, right? You're like, well, I don't know who I would contact. It's not like you contact like the police and you're like, I have this gully, I think it's growing. And you know, it's not exactly clear what this process is. All right, so let's start at the beginning. Say that you are, you're a community member and you identify a problem, right? So here's your problem. You're like, oh, here's a thing. This is a problem. This is an issue. It needs to get solved. But there's a lot of those around the state, right? So there are issues everywhere that relate to water quality. And there are tons of solutions. So they could be GSI projects. They could be floodplain restoration projects. They could be watershed enhancement projects. But they're going to be all over the state. And we have several kind of groups, main nonprofit groups, that work on those. So we have watershed groups. Watershed groups there's a bunch of nonprofits throughout Vermont, and they're all under the umbrella of Watersheds United Vermont. And those are folks who focus specifically on water quality issues. And so they're going to be out there typically identifying problems and coming up with solutions to those problems as well. But we also have conservation districts. And conservation districts started as sort of soil focused, but they've moved on to many other things. And so they work with soil quality, but also water quality, ag, a bunch of different things. So they're also going to be identifying different problems out there in the landscape that deal with water quality or that relate to water quality. We have municipalities, so a town might recognize that a road is eroding out, but it's eroding out because there's something happening upstream where water's getting underneath and it's causing the erosion. So they're going to know about these problems. And then regional planning commissions. So you've got these sort of four main groups that are all kind of pointing in different directions. And this makes for a fairly busy landscape. So the landscape we live in is kind of confusing where, yeah, there's a lot of issues that we can potentially address, but from my point of view of just one person who has all these crews at their disposal to put on these projects, I don't always necessarily know where to look. So this is where state agency comes into play. So the Department of Environmental Conservation is able to kind of look at all these potential issues. And in some ways, they kind of give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And so for those who are familiar with the new Clean Water Initiative, you might have heard about implementation tables, and there's all this sort of buzz around having real projects that groups are going out and doing, having like identifiable projects. And so what DEC has done a great job of is giving the thumbs up or thumbs down to certain projects. A thumbs up project is probably one that's a high priority, right? So it's leading to a large water quality issue, but it's also fairly reasonable to think that we could accomplish that. There are some things that are a big deal, but there's just no way with all the, with the limited resources that we have that it's going to become accomplished. So they'll give the thumbs up and thumbs down. And it's up to me as the watershed manager to kind of look at this landscape and decide, okay, where can VYCC fit into this landscape? And there's people at all these different organizations who are going to be able to help me answer that question. And so part of what I do is I figure out, okay, well, who are the people at the organizations that can help me answer that question? And where are we going to get the most bang for our dollar, right? Where can I put a crew where we have a good relationship, we have a feasible problem that we're going to attack, and that we have a high degree of success? So kind of take this fuzzy landscape, and I'll clarify it a little bit. Oh, actually, just to ask another question. Without this process, sort of this process of groups identifying projects, DEC coming in from the top down saying thumbs up, thumbs down, can you envision a different scenario in which projects get completed? So what would be an alternative to this model, this sort of collaborative model where everyone's kind of working to identify projects and the projects that are the highest priority kind of float to the top? Any ideas? Because you could kind of think like, okay, we're like our own separate organization, we exist in a bubble. We could say, we'll just pick out whatever projects we think are important, we'll just do them, right? And that has been the case for a long time. So folks would go out and you'd say, oh, well, this is a problem, we'll just address it. But that requires that, just the one organization has sort of complete knowledge of the landscape they're working in. And one of the nice things about this model is that we kind of get a state overview. So we can make sure that the priorities that are floating to the top are actually getting accomplished as opposed to people just kind of picking and choosing on their own. So I think that even though this looks confusing, and it is actually, can be difficult to navigate, it actually is really useful for making priority projects happen. So if we take just one project, say there's a GSI rain garden that folks want to have installed in, where would that be? So like Bethel area. Say we want it installed and there's going to be 3 of them and folks want VYCC to do it. So how do we go about doing that? Well, first, let's say a watershed group identifies that issue. So they notice this gully forming. They realize that there's a lot of sediment getting into their waterway and they want something to be done about it. They can hire a consulting firm, they can hire a design firm, and come up with some idea of what they want to have done. So in this case, it would be, a structure similar to this that they would want to have implemented. And here's the real kicker: is then how do you find the funding to do that? And usually we look towards leprechauns for that. But when we can't find a leprechaun full of money, we actually have to apply for grants and other sources of funding to get that money. And that's often the real key to this, is how do you produce those funds to pay a crew or to pay the consulting firm or sometimes even to do the original assessment. And then lastly, I would work with the watershed group to actually identify what's possible for our crew to do and then implement that project. And eventually what we hope to do is kind of form a checklist so that we have this list of projects and we can check off which ones are getting done so that the priority projects on top are getting finished, and then ones that are either less of a priority or more expensive to get done are will be worked on later. And so there's a cool connection here too in terms of partnerships between VYCC and the Conservation Nursery. So we've worked with these folks before, and they're one of our partner organizations. And so in this case, what would happen is the watershed group might recognize some floodplain restoration that has to happen. They might contract with Conservation Nursery to provide the trees for that, the starts for that, and then pay for a VYCC crew to put those in the ground. And so just to do that one project requires multiple partners, lots of collaboration, lots of timing, or lots of planning. But eventually when the thing sort of kicks into gear, you have a lot of bodies putting a lot of trees in the ground and getting a lot of work done in a short amount of time. And that's kind of like Vermont, like summer is so intense, like summer comes and it's so warm and you want to go swimming and all the trees are growing. It's kind of like it with these projects too. You kind of wait and you gather your partners, you gather your funding, and things start to build. And then eventually when everything clicks, you get a lot of work done in a short amount of time. And so a lot of our crews only work for 8 weeks in the summer, but the things that they accomplish are really significant because we've done all this front-end planning. And when it's time to go, they're ready with shovels in hand and they can make these projects happen. Cool, well, I'll hand it over to Mike, unless anyone has any questions. But if you don't, we have time for questions at the end. Thanks.
I did have a question, if you don't mind. Yeah. Specifically, what's the process by which the individual project ideas are floating up from the individual constituencies to DEC?
Yeah, so the way that that's happening is different groups are identifying issues in their community. So each group is sort of regionally based. They identify that and they work with their regional basin planner. So DEC has a bunch of basin planners. They work with them to get those projects put on what's called an implementation table. Yeah. And so they'll say, okay, we noticed there's this erosion happening in this place, and the planner will confirm that, make sure that it's a real issue, and then that will go on basically a list. And so for groups like us, it's great because we can look at the list and we can say, oh, we can do that and that and that. So it makes it much more straightforward.
Okay.
Great, thanks Daniel. My name's Mike Ingalls. I'm here representing the Intervale Conservation Nursery and also the Intervale Center. If I could just get a show of hands of who's familiar with the Intervale and the Intervale Center? Beautiful. Okay, I won't go into too much detail about the Intervale Center. I'm kind of here representing the Conservation Nursery more so, but I'll give you a brief description of what's happening down there, what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve, and then get into the outline of the nursery and what we're about. Similar to VYCC, we are a nonprofit organization focusing mainly in the ag sector, and I will get into that a little bit later. So we are located right in Burlington. Beautiful location. We have about 350 acres that we manage. 180 of that is in ag use, and the rest is a floodplain wetland restoration area. This is our beautiful office. It's an 1800s old farmhouse that we converted and are basically keeping its historical significance and basically keeping all of our offices in this central location. The Intervale Center, we've been around for about 27 years now. So we're a fairly young nonprofit organization, but we do have some experience under our belt. Our mission, to strengthen community food systems, and we do that through various forms. We are trying to transfer the food systems into one that is healthy and sustainable. Like I mentioned, we manage 350 acres of land for sustainable agriculture, conservation, and recreation in the heart of Burlington. Farms, land, and people, that's our focus. So on the farms, we're providing Vermont farmers with business development opportunities. That's all basically funded through various forms that are coming into the state to provide assistance for farmers. So it's actually a free program, and they're able to enroll for 2 years. And they are talking about everything from bookkeeping to transferring of ownership to maybe diversifying their farm, to looking at sustainable practices and looking at a lot of the regulations that are coming in and down the pipeline. Lands, we're restoring Vermont's watersheds by growing and planting native trees. That's where the native nursery comes into play. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then, can't quite see it, but people celebrating local food and local farmers. We're really focused on local products, bringing communities together, celebrating, and really trying to take care of our state. Here's some nice visuals. The Intervale, we're right along the Winooski River. We're part of basically the mouth of the Winooski, so we get a lot of water coming our way. We are a floodplain, a very active floodplain. I think we're flooded twice this past year. It was good timing in the fact that no one was growing anything compared to Tropical Storm Irene, which came in and really hit us hard. And unfortunately, a lot of the farms that are down there farming, they are growing vegetables, and if there's any kind of contamination with flood waters, they cannot sell them. So we were hit really hard after Irene, but it really opened up our eyes in the fact of, all right, this seems to be happening more and more. What can we do to be resilient and continue to function as a farming community? And so we actually worked with some UVM students over the past few years to put together a flood gauge throughout the Intervale, which is very helpful to give awareness of when the river is cresting at 11 to 12 feet. We know which areas are prone to flooding, and therefore we try not to place farmers in those areas to grow. Maybe we'll plant some native trees so then we can actually go and collect some plants. But we definitely learned a few things after Irene, and it was very eye-opening in the fact that climate change is real, and what can we do to be a resilient food farming community in the city limits. Here's another nice visual, Winooski River. You have on the right the city of Winooski. Luckily, thank God, we have some very intact riparian buffers. So if anyone's not familiar with a riparian buffer, it's basically a vegetative zone in between water, moving water, sitting water, and some kind of agricultural field. So you can see here on both sides of the river, after the dam there, that our buffers are fairly intact. The left side of the Intervale, we're looking at about 100 to 150 feet of riparian buffer, to whereas on the city side, it's even more. And thank God for that. Back in the 40s, they actually, with the Natural Resources Conservation Services, they did a project. It was about 2 acres of restoration work right behind the farmhouse, to whereas it's still intact and functioning very well. And it actually has many functions. A few functions are to slow the water current, to actually slow and capture the debris, to capture a lot of the sediment that's coming off the farm fields, habitat, wildlife corridors. We do have a lot of wildlife in our city, surprisingly, and definitely down at the Intervale. So it's some habitat for our animals that are either crossing fields and are getting some water. And a nice aerial visual. And then part of our Intervale, or the Intervale Center, is bringing the community together. So we have created a few summer events. One of them primarily is Summervale, where we bring farmers and community members to eat local food, listen to music, and really enjoy the company of others, and kind of celebrate what we're trying to achieve at the Intervale Center. So you'll see here a Summervale event. Ben Butterfield, the Bestie Field Farm, he's part of an incubator program. It's a nationally funded program. The Intervale is one of 34, I believe, throughout the United States. Basically, the Intervale Center acts as a hub to bring in folks that are interested in farming, creating a business model, business plan, and actually carrying that out for 3 to 5 years. It's very helpful in the fact that there's not a lot of overhead costs. We have land, we have the mentoring and skills, and in-house ability to help folks establish and start a farm, and therefore, ideally, we can transfer them out into the Vermont landscape. And then you have some volunteers helping us in our production field, and then also getting ready to plant some trees there. Okay, the Intervale Conservation Nursery. I've been managing since 2008. Usually every state has a conservation nursery. Vermont does not. We used to, and back I think in the early 80s, it might have, even 70s, it fell. Probably financially, it wasn't able to produce and continue on, and so there was this gap of native trees. Where do we get our native trees? So the trend was to buy from out west, typically Michigan to Montana, around that region, for bare root trees. Some species are maples, willows, alders, birches, aspens, and so on and so forth. There's this huge need, a huge gap. On a given year, Vermont plants about 150,000 trees for restoration work. And most of those trees were coming from out west, so you can kind of think of the impact between shipping, storage, and the fact that these trees are a Vermont or a sugar maple, but they're not necessarily the genotype that fits Vermont's landscapes. So in 2002, the Intervale Conservation Nursery was born with the Fish and Wildlife with a small grant to start growing native woody plants for these types of projects. So the Intervale Nursery grows over 30 species of native locally sourced trees and shrubs for conservation projects throughout Vermont. We provide bare root, tube stock, container trees, as well as bioengineering material. Our plants are grown in ecologically sound manner. We provide comprehensive planting services, including installation and monitoring. One of the things that I pride ourselves in is when I started, I wanted to make sure that we did not add to the pollution that is going into our rivers and lakes. And so how we do that is I don't spray any herbicides or pesticides in our field. We practice organically. We're not certified because we're collecting wild seed, but we do grow things naturally. So I don't use anything in our field besides leaf litter and cover crops and a very small amount of organic fertilizer. But ideally, we're trying to avoid a lot of the excess nutrients that are running off. Luckily, we have that buffer, and we're really working on a healthy soil that turns into a healthy plant. Why choose us? We provide highest quality stock from hand-collected seeds and cuttings. So we just finished up our hardwood collection. Species like dogwoods and willows and elderberry, we collect those in the winter, typically February, and come March we will propagate those in our greenhouse. All of those species will root out naturally, so we don't need to use any synthetic chemicals or powders or rooting hormones. We specialize in big plants and vigorous root systems, so we're able to grow our plants naturally, healthy, to then get very tall and vigorous. The idea of planting a 1 to 2 foot tree into our Vermont landscapes doesn't really work out that well, and you can kind of imagine because of the pressures, herbaceous pressures, the invasive pressures, even the human errors of a farmer mowing his field, and he might not see those trees. And so we're really trying to grow tall, vigorous, strong trees that will live. Our niche is bare root trees. So I actually brought in a few specimens for you all to take a look at, and I'll show you as I talk a little bit more about each individual product that we supply. But our niche is bare root, and also a planting service which we started in 2006 and 2007 with realizing the need of more hands, laborers on the ground implementing these projects. Here is the beginning processes of planting our bare root trees. This is down in Woodstock, the Ottaquiche River watershed. This was a fairly small private landowner. We did work with a few nonprofits, watershed alliances down there that reached out to us looking for native trees and some help planting the trees. And that's basically, instead of like Daniel kind of looking, I find that by us providing the products, species, and stuff like that, and the services, people tend to come to us for the implementation and installation of this stuff. So we are not necessarily out there on the boots, or on the ground, sorry, designing these projects and getting them started, but we're kind of the last piece of the puzzle to then carry that out and make it very successful. This lower picture is our bare root production field. We have about 7 acres down at the Intervale. This is taken in the spring. Part of our niche is bare root trees, but in order to harvest our trees, they need to be in their dormancy period. So basically sleeping. And the idea is to get all of these trees out of the ground before they start to break bud or before they start to awake. So we'll be pulling trees starting Monday. On a given year, we'll harvest about 20 to 25,000 trees, bare root trees. In our field right now, we have about 70 to 80,000 stems. And typically our production cycle is about 2 to 3 years. And then we harvest and then either sell them and or plant them. And then up on the upper left is a tree pot. This is something we've been trying to produce over the last 3 years. Most of our restoration projects are in the middle of nowhere or very far out from the road, and one of the components of a functioning and successful project is being able to get the stuff out to the planting site. And no one wants to carry a 3-gallon pot, 5-gallon pot out to a site. But they still would like something that's rooted out and fairly established. And so that's where we're able to produce that product, which I'll talk a little bit more about. I mentioned we grow by seed and also cutting. The upper left is white pine. Those guys are just starting to get established. White pine are fairly slow to get started, but then once you plant them, they take right off, and they're very, very fast growers, and they're used in a lot of restoration projects. Most of these projects that I'm involved in, they're looking for early successional plants, fast growers, that then will establish some type of ecosystem that then they'll go through their successional changes. So we're really trying to get material in there that will start and grow really quickly to then start creating shade, start getting established and kind of having a very positive function. On the lower left, these are high bush cranberry. These were actually collected and grown from softwood cuttings. So softwood cuttings we take during the month of June, basically as a plant is starting to grow the new growth. We will take a cutting off of that new growth, this year's growth, and propagate that in our greenhouse. Each species has its own little quirks that we have figured out over our time of how they like to be grown and germinated and all that good stuff. It's definitely a process that we're slowly learning and just trying to improve on that. So we grow native trees and shrubs. These are, like I mentioned earlier, common elderberry from hardwood cuttings, shrub willow from hardwood cuttings. Willow is by far one of our most sought out species that we grow. You can plant this willows anywhere and they will thrive. Not only do they produce vegetatively, they produce sexually. So you'll find that if a tree or a branch, not a tree, but if a branch is being pushed over by an ice jam or some sort and laying on the ground, they'll actually start to root out and create a whole new plant. So willows are used for fascines and live stakes as well. Really great resilient plant that you can plant anywheres. There's over 500 different native bugs that are attracted to willows. So you can kind of think of the food chain that these willows provide to our landscape and habitat. And they are one of the first to flower. So you can think of our bees that need a lot of that energy in the beginning of the year to get established and to be a healthy hive. Our production field, some nice visuals. This is how we harvest our bare root trees. A lot of people aren't really familiar of how the process goes. We need a very large, big tractor, usually 90 horse with a creeper gear. And then we have this implement. It's a plant lifter that is specially made and ordered and used specifically for lifting trees out of the ground. It's a really cool process. Basically, you have a big blade, you go so deep, And it's got these fingers that actually will, as I drive over the plants, they will sift the tree out of the ground very gently and then lay them down and have the bare root just slightly covered. And so then when the crews come in, they're able to start grading and bagging to order. So you'll see here our crews are out there working behind the tractor, grading. We sell all of our bare root trees by increments of a foot, so 1 to 2 foot, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and 5 plus. Can anyone guess what a 5 plus tree would cost? $8. Close, $5. So you can really think of our impact that we're able to offer a customer or a nonprofit that's doing these types of projects where they're very limited with their funds. And they are really trying to have a large impact. And typically, most often than not, they will be there just once and then leave. So this is where we're trying to grow large, healthy, vigorous native plants that are then planted and purchased at a really affordable cost so they can get a bang for their buck.
Is that a set price or does it change in the order?
No, at this point, it's a set price. The larger nurseries out west, they're talking millions of trees that they grow and sell. They typically have a discount when you order larger quantities. But there are downsides to that as well. Specifically, they harvest most often than not their trees in the fall, and then they'll sit in a cooler for 4 to 5 months. And trees usually are drying up, desiccating, struggling, stressed, miserable, to where we leave our trees in the ground and harvest them in the spring. So they're nice and comfy and in their natural environment. And on the right, you have some dogwoods that are getting established. This is a second year's growth from the cuttings and doing fairly well to where the third year they will be around 5 feet tall, typically. So our tree pots, like I mentioned earlier, this is an example. So easier to handle, easier to plant, and ideally well established. So this guy is ready to be planted. We don't like to keep our species in a container for so long. As you can imagine, they start to grow. So usually our production is about 2 to 3 years, and then we try to get these guys out into the landscape. Live stakes. These are willows, so bioengineering material. Glorified stick. There is a process that we try to follow, or a protocol, where when we collect these guys, we immediately put them in our cooler and wrapped in burlap, wet, moist burlap. So we want to keep these guys nice and cozy and fresh and healthy and living. So they need water because there's no water being absorbed at the moment. So we'll keep these guys, we'll soak them before they're planted for 24 hours before they get into the ground. And as you can see here, some of the projects that come our way here and there is lakeshore stabilization. This was up in Georgia, and this private landowner was losing their bank to erosion, so he actually had someone come in, excavating company, put in some larger material with some topsoil. We came in, put the erosion fabric down, and started planting the live stakes. I can tell you this site was 50-50 in success. It was very rocky. Fascines, we do a lot of this. We do about 5,000 linear feet a year. This project was up in Stowe on the Mountain Access Road. And this is before, basically, you're looking at about 150 bundles where we built these out in our field. So not only do we grow, but we have a collection area where we're able to collect the material. And there's the crew working alongside that bank. So planting the fascines, and then we interdisplaced tree pots and live stakes. Planting services, not only are we a native nursery, but we provide planting services. So a technician with the NRCS will be like, here's a job sheet with such and such stems. Can you provide plants and the services? And here I'll give them an estimate and they'll say yay or nay. On a given year, we'll do about 10 projects a year related to CREPs or WREs and so on and so forth. Stewarding the Intervale, very similar to the VYCC. We're not only planting, but we're trying to help with the invasive pressures. It's only going to get worse. Here's a before and after. That, I think, was a honeysuckle. And that took them 3.5 hours. Getting ready, got the shovels lined up. This is a very important tool of ours. And that's kind of the beginning of the project. And then community, you can't quite see, but we're also, like I mentioned, trying to bring more awareness, bring the community together, a sense of social responsibilities. So a lot of businesses, UVM Medical Center, IBM, JetBlue, they're trying to build team building amongst coworkers. And they will actually come down and help us in our nursery and/or community planting projects. This is us as a community. And then these are some of the partners we work with. So the NRCS, the Vermont Fish and Wildlife, Vermont Conservation Districts, Friends of the Winooski River, White River Partnership, VYCC, White River Partnership, Connecticut River, municipalities, Northwoods, Red Start, so on and so forth. So as Daniel mentioned, there's a lot of people that are out there working all basically together to try to do the greater good. Some elderberry seeds, some red maple. Nice visual. And that's what we're trying to achieve. So 90% of our plants are going towards a riparian buffer. So we're trying to establish those guys. So I think my time is up, unfortunately. But I do have some visuals if people want to come up and take a look. Some seeds, a red acorn just starting to emerge. Highbush cranberry or northern white cedar. To show you a bare root sapling. This is what you want to do. So this is basically a bare root tree. So you can think of the ease of getting this stuff in the ground. Very easily. And you do a little root pruning, and this is the red meat. Thank you.
Well, thank you both. So we have time for like 1 or 2 questions for Dan or Mike. If anybody has a question, I'm just going to pass the mic around for recording the presentation, so we just want to get your questions on the record. So does anybody have a question? All right, well, thank you all
Beautiful.
for coming.
Thank you.
Oh, we got one?
Are your plants in the pots, they're grown in a greenhouse, and the bare ones are grown outside?
Yep. Yep, we have a greenhouse and a shrub mat. So we start everything at the greenhouse and then transplant it into our field and/or the growing shrub mat.
I remember last year you guys started, or you had an internship to try to figure out how to get plants like the cheapest way to other places.
Yeah, shipping. Yep.
Was that successful?
We're carrying it out this spring.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's one thing we're trying to be a part of is being able to ship our trees. At the moment, we have people pick up or we deliver. So just trying to grow. Like I said, the demand is 150,000. We're doing a very small fraction of that. So we're just trying to have more supply for the demand. Thanks.
Great, thank you both so much. Thanks for coming, everyone.